The fluorescent lights of Save More Grocery hummed their eternal drone, casting everything in that particular shade of tiredness that came from working double shifts 6 days a week. Maya Rodriguez moved through her checkout lane with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd scanned thousands of items, her fingers finding barcodes by muscle memory, while her mind wandered to more pressing concerns, like how she'd stretch $23 until Friday's paycheck. The store was relatively quiet for a Tuesday afternoon, just the usual scattered customers navigating aisles of discounted cereal and day-old bread. Maya's lane sat at the far end, number 12, closest to the parking lot windows where she could watch the Chicago autumn paint the world in shades of amber and rust. She'd learned to find beauty in small things during the 2 years since her husband's death, when the bottom had fallen out of her world and left her clinging to a cashier's wage and whatever tips she could earn. Paper or plastic? She asked automatically, her voice carrying the practiced cheerfulness that management demanded, even when your feet ached and your back screamed and you'd already worked 8 hours with 4 more to go. The customer, a businessman in an expensive suit that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent, barely glanced up from his phone. Plastic, he muttered, his attention absorbed by whatever crisis played out on his screen. Maya had gotten good at reading people during her time behind the register. This man radiated the particular tension of someone accustomed to control suddenly finding himself without it. His jaw was tight, his free hand drumming an agitated rhythm against the conveyor belt as she scanned his items: organic produce, imported cheese, a bottle of wine that cost $60 if the price tag was correct. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. She'd just reached for the wine when movement outside the window caught her attention. A black van, windows tinted dark as midnight, pulling into the parking lot with deliberate slowness. Something about it felt wrong, the way it drifted past empty spaces closer to the entrance, heading instead toward the far corner where a small girl waited on a bench. Maya's hands stilled on the wine bottle, her chest tightening with recognition she couldn't quite name. The girl couldn't have been more than 7, her dark hair pulled into a ponytail, wearing a private school uniform with a crest Maya didn't recognize. She sat alone, swinging her legs, completely absorbed in whatever game played on the tablet in her small hands. The van stopped directly in front of the bench. "Excuse me?" the businessman said sharply, his impatience cutting through Maya's growing unease. "Are you going to finish, or—" 2 men emerged from the van's side door, moving with practiced coordination that made Maya's stomach drop. One was broad-shouldered and bald, the other wiry with a scar running down his left cheek. They weren't dressed like kidnappers from movies, no masks or obvious weapons, but the intentional way they approached the girl, the casual glance around to check for witnesses, sent alarm screaming through every maternal instinct Maya possessed. The girl looked up from her tablet, her expression shifting from mild curiosity to confusion. She said something Maya couldn't hear through the glass, shaking her head. The bald man crouched down, speaking to her with what might have looked like kindness to anyone not paying close attention. But Maya saw the way his hand moved to grip the girl's arm, saw the moment confusion became fear on that small face. "Miss?" The businessman's voice had taken on an edge. "Hello?" Maya's mind raced through options in the split second before action became necessary. Call the police. But by the time they arrived, that van would be gone. Scream. But the store was too far from the parking lot, sound muffled by thick glass and distance. Run outside herself. But she was 5'3" and weighed maybe 115 pounds, hardly a match for 2 grown men clearly comfortable with violence. The girl tried to pull away. The scarred man's hand clamped over her mouth. Something in Maya's chest ignited, a fury born from every protective instinct she possessed, channeled through the lens of her own daughter's face superimposed over this stranger's child. She grabbed the receipt printer, yanking paper free with shaking hands, and scrawled in desperate block letters. Your daughter just got taken. Black van. Go now. She slapped the note directly into the businessman's hand with enough force to make him look up, startled, his phone finally lowering as he processed her expression, wild-eyed, urgent, pointing toward the window where the men were lifting the struggling girl toward the van's open door. For one terrible moment she thought he wouldn't react, that he'd dismiss her as crazy or confused. Then his gaze followed her pointing finger, and Maya watched his entire body transform. The tension she'd noticed earlier crystallized into something cold and lethal, his expensive suit suddenly seeming like camouflage over something far more dangerous than any businessman had a right to be. He moved, not toward the exit like a normal person would, not fumbling for his phone to call authorities. He vaulted over the checkout counter with an athlete's grace, his dress shoes hitting the linoleum with barely a sound before he was sprinting toward the automatic doors with speed that seemed impossible for a man his size. Maya's hand found her own phone, fingers trembling as she dialed 911, but her eyes stayed locked on the scene unfolding in the parking lot, like a nightmare playing out in slow motion. The businessman hit the parking lot at a full run, his trajectory aimed directly at the van where the bald man was trying to shove the girl inside while she kicked and fought with everything her small body possessed. The scarred man had moved to the driver's seat, engine already running, exhaust billowing white in the October chill. Stop! The businessman's voice carried across the distance, a command that seemed to vibrate with authority even Maya could feel through the glass. Put her down, now. The bald man spun, his hand moving inside his jacket in a motion Maya recognized from too many late-night crime dramas. But before he could draw whatever weapon he was reaching for, the businessman was on him, moving with a violence that was both shocking and precisely controlled. Maya had never seen anyone fight like that. Not the wild brawling of bar fights or schoolyard scuffles, but something methodical and brutal, each strike landing with devastating accuracy. The bald man went down hard, his head cracking against the van's side panel with a sound Maya felt in her bones. The girl had fallen when the bald man released her, her small body hitting the pavement with impact that made Maya wince. But the businessman's attention was already on the van as it lurched forward, the scarred man attempting to flee. He moved faster than should have been possible, reaching through the driver's window to grab the steering wheel, his other hand finding the door handle and yanking with enough force to tear it open despite the vehicle's momentum. The van swerved wildly, tires screeching against pavement as driver and businessman struggled for control. Maya watched in horror as they careened toward a line of parked cars, certain they would crash, certain someone would die in the twisted metal and broken glass. Then the businessman's hand found the scarred man's throat, and with one violent motion, he hauled him bodily from the moving vehicle, both men tumbling to the asphalt as the van continued its driverless trajectory into a concrete light post with a crash that shook the building's windows. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice crackled through Maya's phone, which she'd apparently managed to dial without consciously remembering doing so. Kidnapping, Maya gasped, her voice barely recognizable. Save More Grocery on Western Avenue. 2 men tried to take a little girl. There's been a fight. Someone needs to come now. Through the window, the businessman had risen to his feet, leaving the scarred man groaning on the pavement. He moved immediately to the girl, who had pushed herself into a sitting position, her school uniform torn at the sleeve, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes blazing with the same fierce determination Maya had seen in the man who'd just saved her. He knelt beside her, his hands hovering as if afraid to touch her, afraid she might break. His mouth moved in words Maya couldn't hear, but she saw the girl's response. Small arms flinging themselves around his neck, her face burying against his. shoulder as her whole body shook with sobs that had been held back during the violence, but now flooded free in the safety of his presence. The businessman's arms came around her carefully, protectively, and something in that gesture made Maya's chest ache with recognition. This wasn't just any concerned citizen who'd happened to intervene. This was a father holding his daughter like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, like he'd burn down cities and salt the earth to keep her safe. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The bald man stirred, attempting to rise, but the businessman's head snapped toward him with a look that froze Maya's blood even through glass and distance. He said something sharp and cold, his body shifting to shield the girl from the kidnapper's view. And whatever he said made the bald man go very still, hands raising in surrender despite the blood streaming from his split scalp. Maya should have looked away then, should have focused on finishing the 911 call or attending to the abandoned groceries still sitting on her conveyor belt. Instead, she watched as the businessman stood, lifting his daughter with him, cradling her against his chest as he turned toward the store. Their eyes met through the window, his dark and intense, carrying depths of fury and gratitude and something else Maya couldn't quite name, and she felt the full weight of what had just happened settle over her like a physical thing. She'd seen something she wasn't supposed to see, intervened in something that extended beyond a simple kidnapping. The way those men had moved, the professional coordination of their attempt, the expensive van now smoking against the light post. This wasn't random. This was planned, organized, the kind of thing that involved players far more dangerous than street criminals snatching an unattended child. And the businessman striding toward the store entrance with his daughter clutched protectively against him wasn't just any concerned father. The controlled violence she'd witnessed, the lethal precision of his movements, the authority that had radiated from him even in crisis. These weren't skills learned in corporate boardrooms or weekend self-defense classes. The automatic doors slid open. He entered carrying his daughter, who'd buried her face against his neck, her small hands fisted in his shirt like she'd never let go. Up close, Maya could see details she'd missed from a distance. The scar along his jawline, barely visible beneath expensive cologne and immaculate grooming. The calluses on his knuckles that spoke of violence as a regular occurrence rather than desperate necessity. The way his eyes swept the store with tactical awareness, cataloging exits and potential threats before settling on Maya with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You saved her," he said simply, his voice carrying an accent she couldn't quite place, something European beneath the American English, polished but not quite, erased. "You saw what was happening, and you acted when anyone else would have looked away." Maya's hands gripped the edge of her register, needing something solid to hold onto as her knees threatened to give out from the adrenaline crash hitting her system. I just wrote a note. You're the one who... Without your note, I wouldn't have known until too late," he interrupted gently, his hand moving in soothing circles on his daughter's back. "She'd be gone. They'd have disappeared into the city and I'd be..." His voice caught just slightly, just enough for Maya to see the father beneath the dangerous exterior. "I owe you a debt I can never adequately repay." "You don't owe me anything," Maya insisted, even as her mind screamed warnings about debts owed to men like this, about favors that came with strings attached and prices paid in currencies she couldn't afford. "I did what anyone would do, what anyone should do when they see a child in danger. Most people don't." The girl's voice was muffled against her father's shoulder, but Maya heard the words clearly, heard the weight of experience that shouldn't exist in someone so young. "Most people pretend they don't see. Papa says people are scared to help because helping means getting involved." The businessman's expression softened fractionally as he looked at his daughter, a ghost of a smile touching lips that had been set in grim lines moments before. "Papa might have been too cynical," he murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "This kind woman proved that today." Red and blue lights flashed through the windows as police cruisers pulled into the parking lot, officers emerging with hands on weapons as they approached the scene where two men lay groaning on the pavement beside a smoking van. Maya watched the businessman's posture shift subtly, his body language transforming from protective father to someone preparing for an interrogation he'd clearly navigated before. "The police will have questions," he said, his attention returning to Maya with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously seen and evaluated. "About what you witnessed, what you did. They'll want a statement." "I'll tell them the truth," Maya replied, lifting her chin despite the fear coursing through her veins. "I saw two men trying to take a little girl, and I alerted her father. That's what happened." Something flickered in his eyes. Approval, perhaps, or recognition of an ally when he'd expected an obstacle. "The truth? Yes. But perhaps—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Perhaps the complete truth includes only what they need to know. What you saw in the parking lot. Not speculation about who I am or why someone might target my daughter." It wasn't quite a threat, but it carried weight nonetheless. The suggestion that Maya's safety might depend on how much she revealed to authorities. She should have been terrified, should have demanded protection, insisted on telling everything she'd observed and suspected. Instead, she found herself nodding, understanding in some instinctive way that this man's enemies were not people she wanted noticing her existence. "I saw an attempted kidnapping," she said slowly, working out the boundaries of truth and omission. "I alerted you, you stopped them. That's all I know for certain." "Smart," he approved, his free hand reaching into his jacket pocket to retrieve a business card that he placed on her register with deliberate care. "My name is Dante Romano. That card has my private number. If the police give you any difficulty, if you face any consequences for helping today, if anything unusual happens in your life that feels connected to this incident, you call me. Immediately." Maya picked up the card with trembling fingers, reading the embossed text. "Dante Romano, Romano Imports and Exports. A legitimate-looking business, the kind of front that organized crime had perfected over decades of operating in plain sight." "I don't want money," she said quickly, needing him to understand she hadn't helped because she expected payment. "I didn't do this for a reward or—" "I know." Dante's interruption was gentle, understanding. "But protection isn't optional. They saw your face when you pointed me toward them. They'll remember the woman who cost them their target. I can't allow you to remain vulnerable because you were brave enough to help my daughter." The reality of that statement sank through Maya's chest like a stone through water, pulling her down into depths she hadn't anticipated. The men who'd tried to take this child, whoever had sent them, wouldn't simply accept failure. They'd want to eliminate loose ends, and she'd just painted a target on her own back by getting involved. "I have a daughter," Maya heard herself say, the words escaping before she could stop them. "She's 9. She's at school right now, but she'll be home at 3:30 and I'm supposed to pick her up and—" Panic was rising now, crystallizing around the thought of her own child vulnerable and unprotected because Maya had done the right thing. "If these people know who I am, if they come after me, they won't get the chance." Dante's voice cut through her spiral with absolute certainty. "Give me your daughter's school information. I'll have someone I trust watching her until you finish your shift. Then we'll discuss longer-term security measures." "I can't afford—" "This isn't about money," Dante said firmly, his daughter finally lifting her head from his shoulder to study Maya with large, dark eyes that held too much understanding for someone so young. "This is about responsibility. You protected mine, so I protect yours. That's how this works." A police officer approached the entrance, his radio crackling with chatter as he pushed through the doors. "We need statements from everyone who witnessed the incident," he announced, his gaze moving between Maya and Dante with the practiced assessment of someone who'd learned to read dangerous situations. Starting with you, sir, I'm going to need you to put the child down and— No. The single word from Dante carried such absolute authority that the officer actually hesitated. My daughter has just been through a traumatic experience. She stays with me during questioning. You can ask your questions, but I don't release her until I'm certain she's safe. The officer's jaw tightened, clearly weighing whether to push the issue, when his radio crackled again. A voice on the other end said something Maya couldn't quite make out, but whatever the message was, it made the officer's expression shift from confrontational to wary. "We'll need you to come down to the station," he said finally, his tone more respectful than it had been moments before. "Both of you, and the witness." His attention turned to Maya, taking in her Save More uniform and name tag. "Maya Rodriguez, we'll need a detailed statement about what you observed." The next 3 hours passed in a blur of questions asked and carefully answered, of police station waiting rooms and fluorescent lights that made everything look slightly unreal. Maya called her daughter's school from Dante's phone. Her own had died somewhere between scanning groceries and watching a kidnapping attempt, and was assured by a voice she didn't recognize that someone named Anthony would be handling pickup and taking Sophia to the house until Maya could retrieve her. "Who's Anthony?" Maya had asked, panic edging back into her voice. "My head of security," Dante had answered from across the room, where he sat with his daughter in his lap, both of them giving statements to different officers. "Former Secret Service. He's better equipped to protect your child than anyone else in this city. I promise you, she's safe." And somehow, despite every rational instinct screaming that she shouldn't trust a man who clearly operated outside the law, Maya believed him. The police released them as sunset painted the station windows in shades of orange and gold, the detective in charge giving Maya his card and instructions to call if she remembered any additional details. He gave Dante a look that spoke volumes, recognition of who he was, what he represented, and the careful dance of jurisdiction and influence that meant some battles weren't worth fighting. "My car is this way," Dante said as they emerged into the parking lot, his daughter now walking beside him but keeping her small hand firmly clasped in his much larger one. "I'll drive you to retrieve your daughter, and then we need to talk about what comes next." "I should just take a cab," Maya started, but Dante's expression made it clear that wasn't actually an option. "The people who tried to take Isabella don't give up easily," he said, using his daughter's name for the first time. "Right now, they're regrouping, trying to figure out what went wrong and who interfered. By tomorrow morning at the latest, they'll have identified you from security, footage, or witness statements. Before that happens, you need to be somewhere they can't easily reach you." The car was exactly what Maya expected. A black BMW with windows tinted just dark enough to be legal, pristine interior that smelled of leather and expensive cologne. Isabella climbed into a booster seat in the back with practiced ease while Maya settled into the passenger seat, her reflection in the window showing a woman who looked shell-shocked and exhausted. "Where are we going?" she asked as Dante pulled smoothly into traffic, navigating the city streets with the confidence of someone who knew every shortcut and back route. "My house," Dante replied simply. "It's the most secure location in Chicago. Your daughter is already there, probably eating dinner in the kitchen and interrogating my housekeeper about why we have so many rooms that nobody sleeps in." Despite everything, Maya felt a smile tug at her lips at the image of Sophia's endless curiosity overwhelming some poor domestic worker. "She does ask a lot of questions." "So does Isabella," Dante said, glancing in the rearview mirror at his daughter, who'd pulled out her tablet and was absorbed in some game that involved matching colored gems. "Usually about things I'm not prepared to answer honestly." The house, calling it a house, felt like calling the ocean damp, sat in Lincoln Park behind iron gates and manicured hedges, a 3-story stone mansion that spoke of old money and older power. Maya's entire apartment could have fit in the foyer, where a crystal chandelier cast prismatic light across marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Mama! Sophia appeared from a doorway to the left, her face lighting up as she launched herself at Maya with 9-year-old enthusiasm. This place is amazing! They have a library with actual sliding ladders like in Beauty and the Beast. And the kitchen has 3 ovens. And there's a lady named Mrs. Chen who makes the best cookies I've ever had, and she said I could help bake tomorrow if we're still here. Maya caught her daughter, holding her tight while processing the rapid-fire information. You're okay? Nobody scared you or… Anthony is super cool, Sophia interrupted, pulling back to gesture at a man who'd appeared silently in the doorway. Late 40s, built like he spent his life in the gym, with eyes that tracked every movement in the room with professional vigilance. He knows like 17 languages, and he taught me how to say please in Mandarin. Ching, Anthony supplied with a slight smile that softened his otherwise severe features. She's a quick learner. No trouble at all. Thank you, Maya said quietly, meaning it more than any thanks she'd ever offered. For keeping her safe. Just doing my job, ma'am. Anthony's attention shifted to Dante. Perimeter is secure. Garcia is running background on the 2 men from the parking lot. Preliminary results should be ready within the hour. Dante nodded, his hand still resting on Isabella's shoulder even as he processed the security update with a businessman's efficiency. Have Mrs. Chen prepare dinner for 4 in the small dining room, something child-friendly, and set up the East Wing guest suite for Ms. Rodriguez and her daughter. We can't stay here, Maya protested, even as Sophia bounced excitedly at the prospect. We have an apartment, and I have work tomorrow, and this is too much. Your apartment is being watched, Dante interrupted gently but firmly. Garcia confirmed it 20 minutes ago. 2 men in a sedan across the street, rotating shifts. They're waiting for you to come home. The blood drained from Maya's face as the full reality of her situation crashed down. She'd helped save a child, and in doing so, had made herself and her daughter targets for people who clearly had resources and determination enough to track them down within hours. How long? She whispered, her arms tightening around Sophia. How long do we have to hide? Dante's expression was grim as he met her eyes. Until I've eliminated the threat. Completely. The guest suite was larger than Maya's entire apartment, decorated in shades of cream and gold that seemed to glow in the soft lamplight. Sophia had already claimed the 4-poster bed, bouncing experimentally on a mattress that probably cost more than 3 months of Maya's rent. Can we really stay here, Mama? She asked, her eyes wide with the kind of wonder that broke Maya's heart because it revealed how little luxury her daughter had experienced in 9 years of life. The bathroom has a tub big enough to swim in. Just for tonight, Maya said, trying to convince herself as much as Sophia. Tomorrow we'll figure out something else. Maybe stay with… She trailed off, realizing she had no one. No family in Chicago, friends who were really just work acquaintances, no safety net beyond her own determination to keep working, keep surviving, keep providing for the daughter who deserved so much more than Maya could give. A soft knock interrupted her spiral. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair pulled into a neat bun. Dinner is ready whenever you'd like to come down, she said with a slight accent that suggested Cantonese roots. Mr. Romano asked me to mention that he'd appreciate your company, but understands if you'd prefer to eat up here. Sophia was already sliding off the bed, clearly intending to accept the dinner invitation, when Maya caught her hand. We should probably just stay here. We don't want to impose… You're not imposing. Dante's voice came from the hallway as he appeared behind Mrs. Chen, having changed from his torn and bloodied suit into dark slacks and a crisp white shirt that somehow made him look both more casual and more dangerous. Isabella has been asking about Sophia. She doesn't get to spend much time with children her own age. The unspoken implication hung heavy. that Isabella's life was isolated by necessity, surrounded by security and suspicion, unable to form the normal friendships that other children took for granted. "Please, Mama," Sophia pleaded, using the voice that Maya could rarely resist. "I promise I'll use my best manners." 20 minutes later, they sat in what Dante had called the small dining room, though it could have easily seated 12. The table was set with china that looked antique and probably priceless, but Isabella and Sophia seemed completely unconcerned about the value of what they ate from, chattering about school and favorite books, with the easy camaraderie of children who'd decided they were friends. "Isabella goes to Westbridge Academy," Sophia announced between bites of the best chicken parmesan Maya had ever tasted. "That's the fancy school with the uniforms and the language classes. She's learning French and Mandarin. And Italian," Isabella added, glancing at her father. "Papa says it's important to know where we come from, even if we don't live there anymore." Dante's expression softened at his daughter's words, pride evident despite the shadows that seemed to live permanently behind his eyes. "My family is from Sicily originally," he explained to Maya, "several generations ago, but some traditions persist." Maya understood what he wasn't saying, that his family's business had persisted too, evolving and adapting but maintaining the core structure that had made the Romano name synonymous with power in certain circles. "Sophia goes to Lincoln Elementary," Maya offered, trying to maintain some semblance of normal dinner conversation. "She's in the gifted program, top of her class in mathematics." "Mom makes me sound like a nerd," Sophia complained good-naturedly. "I'm also really good at kickball." Isabella laughed, the sound bright and genuine, so different from the terrified child Maya had seen through the grocery store window. "I'm terrible at sports. Papa hired someone to teach me tennis last year, and I hit myself in the face with the racket." "3 times," Dante added dryly, but his affection was clear. "We decided perhaps music lessons would be safer." The meal continued with surprising ease, the girls dominating conversation while Maya and Dante exchanged careful glances across the table. She was hyper-aware of him in ways that felt inappropriate given the circumstances, the way his hands moved when he spoke, elegant despite the scarred knuckles. The rare smile that transformed his severe features when Isabella said something that delighted him. The protective way he watched his daughter, as if she might disappear if he looked away for too long. After dinner, Mrs. Chen appeared with warm cookies and milk, ushering the girls toward what she called the media room to watch a movie. Sophia went willingly, her hand clasped in Isabella's as they chattered about which princess movie was the best, their voices fading down the hallway. Silence settled over the dining room, suddenly feeling much smaller with just the two of them. "We need to discuss your situation," Dante said finally, his businessman's efficiency returning now that his daughter was out of earshot. "Garcia's preliminary report identified the men from the parking lot as hired muscle. Local talent. Not particularly skilled, which suggests whoever ordered the kidnapping used them as a first attempt. When it failed, they'll escalate." Maya's fingers tightened around her water glass. Who would want to kidnap Isabella? Several possibilities. Dante leaned back in his chair, his expression grave. "I have business rivals who would love to use her as leverage, criminal organizations that see her as a vulnerability to exploit. Even some legitimate competitors who might think removing my focus would give them advantage in upcoming negotiations." He paused, studying Maya's face. "What you witnessed today was an opening move in a game that's been playing out for years. The only difference is that this time, someone was brave enough to interfere." "I'm not brave," Maya said quietly. "I'm terrified. I can barely keep my own daughter fed and safe, and now I've put her in danger because I couldn't just look away." "You are brave." Dante's interruption was firm, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Bravery isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. You saw a child in danger and you found a way to help when most people would have convinced themselves it wasn't their problem. And now we're both in danger because of it. You're both under my protection because of it, Dante corrected. Which means the full resources of my organization are dedicated to keeping you safe. Those men watching your apartment? They'll be gone by morning. Anyone who tries to approach you or Sophia will have to go through security that makes the Secret Service look amateur. You're not alone in this, Maya. The way he said her name felt different from how other people said it. Softer, with an attention to each syllable that made it sound almost musical. Maya looked away, focusing on the expensive wallpaper rather than the man who'd somehow become central to her survival in the space of a few hours. I can't live like this, she said finally. Hiding in mansions, surrounded by guards, waiting for threats I can't see or understand. I have a job, bills to pay, a life that doesn't include. She gestured vaguely at the opulent room around them. All of this. Your job at Savemore pays $9 an hour, Dante stated matter-of-factly. You work 50 hours a week, but they schedule you just under 40 to avoid providing benefits. Your apartment costs $800 a month, which leaves you approximately $200 after utilities for food, clothing, and any unexpected expenses. You're one emergency away from eviction, one illness away from losing everything. Maya's face flushed with humiliation and anger. You had me investigated? I had you protected, Dante corrected gently, which required understanding your circumstances. I'm not judging your situation, Maya. I'm stating facts so you understand that I'm offering you an alternative. I don't want charity. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering employment. Dante stood, moving to the sideboard where a decanter of amber liquid sat waiting. He poured 2 glasses without asking, setting one in front of Maya before resuming his seat. Mrs. Chen has been asking me to hire an assistant for years. Someone to help manage the household, coordinate schedules, handle the 1,000 details that running an estate like this requires. The position would include housing in the West Wing, full benefits, and a salary of $75,000 annually. The number hit Maya like a physical blow. $75,000 was more than she'd made in the last 3 years combined. You're making up a job? I'm offering you a legitimate position that I genuinely need filled, Dante interrupted. Mrs. Chen is 63 and has been threatening retirement. She's agreed to stay on and train the right person, but only if that person meets her very exacting standards. You have organizational skills, attention to detail, and most importantly, you've proven yourself trustworthy in a crisis. Those are qualities I value. Maya stared at the glass of whiskey, watching light refract through the expensive crystal. And if I say no? Then I'll respect your decision. Dante's voice was quiet but sincere. I'll maintain security on your apartment until the immediate threat is neutralized. I'll ensure you and Sophia remain safe. But I won't force you to accept help you don't want. Why? The question burst out before Maya could stop it. Why go to all this trouble for a stranger who just happened to be working a register at the right time? Dante was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. My wife died 3 years ago, he said finally, his voice carrying a weight that spoke of grief that had scarred over but never fully healed. Cancer. She fought it for 18 months while I threw money at the best doctors, the newest treatments, everything medicine could offer. But some battles can't be won with resources or connections or power. He took a drink, the amber liquid disappearing smoothly. She made me promise that I'd raise Isabella to be brave, to help people when she could, to not let the darkness of my world extinguish her light. His eyes refocused on Maya, and she saw genuine emotion there beneath the controlled exterior. Today, Isabella learned that sometimes strangers risk themselves for others. That goodness exists even in people who have no obligation to care. You gave my daughter that lesson, Maya. You showed her that the world contains people like you, who act when action is needed. That's worth more than any debt I could repay in money. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Maya lifted her glass with trembling hands, taking a sip that burned pleasantly down her throat. The whiskey was smooth, expensive, probably older than she was. Like everything else in this house, it spoke of a world she'd never been part of, never imagined being part of. I need time, she said finally, to think about this, to figure out if accepting your help means compromising everything I've tried to teach Sophia about standing on our own. Take the time you need. Dante stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. But do it from here, where you're safe. Stay tonight at minimum. Tomorrow we can discuss logistics, review the job details, and you can make your decision with full information. A crash from somewhere down the hall made them both tense, followed immediately by Isabella's voice calling out, "We're okay. Sophia just knocked over the popcorn bowl, but nothing broke." The tension released as Dante's mouth quirked in something approaching a smile. "I should check on them before they destroy the media room. Make yourself comfortable, Maya. This house is yours as long as you need it." He left her alone in the dining room, his footsteps echoing down the marble hallway toward the sounds of childish laughter. Maya sat in the silence, processing the surreal turn her life had taken in less than 12 hours. This morning, she'd been worried about stretching $23 until Friday. Tonight, she sat in a mansion drinking whiskey that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget, being offered a job that would transform her entire financial reality. The whiplash was almost too much to process. Her phone, Dante had given her a new one since hers had died, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Security confirmed clear for the night. 2 teams on rotation. You're safe. Anthony safe. The word felt foreign, like a luxury she'd forgotten existed. When had she last felt truly safe? Before her husband's sudden death, probably. Before the hospital bills and funeral costs had drained their meager savings. Before she'd learned that the world was indifferent to single mothers struggling to survive, that nobody was coming to rescue her. That safety was something you built yourself from determination and endless work. But maybe that wasn't entirely true anymore. Maya found the media room by following the sound of animated singing and discovered both girls sprawled on an enormous sectional couch. Sophia tucked under a cashmere throw that probably cost more than Maya's car. Isabella leaning against her father's side while he absently stroked her hair. On the screen, cartoon characters sang about letting go and embracing change. Dante looked up as Maya entered, gesturing to the empty space beside him. She hesitated only a moment before settling onto the couch, maintaining a careful distance that Sophia immediately eliminated by climbing into her lap. "This is the part where she builds the ice castle," Sophia whispered, completely absorbed in the movie despite having seen it at least a dozen times. "It's so pretty." Isabella nodded enthusiastically. "I asked Papa if we could build an ice castle in the backyard, but he said Chicago winters are cold enough without adding more ice." "Practical concerns," Dante murmured, but his eyes were on Maya rather than the screen. In the flickering light of the television, she could see details she'd missed before. The faint scar along his temple, the gray threading through his dark hair at the temples, the lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled less than he should. The movie played out with familiar beats while Sophia and Isabella provided running commentary. Maya found herself relaxing despite everything, lulled by the warmth of the room and her daughter's solid weight in her lap. When she glanced over, she caught Dante watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Thoughtful, perhaps, or calculating. Maybe both. By the time the credits rolled, Sophia was fighting sleep, her eyelids drooping despite her insistence that she wasn't tired. Isabella had already nodded off against her father's shoulder, her breathing slow and even. "I should get her to bed," Maya whispered, shifting to stand. Let me. Dante carefully extracted himself from Isabella, lifting his sleeping daughter with practiced ease. Mrs. Chen prepared Isabella's room next to your suite. I thought. He paused, vulnerability flickering across his features. After today, she might sleep better knowing Sophia is close by. Something in Maya's chest tightened at the admission that this powerful, dangerous man was worried about his daughter's nightmares, that he'd arranged their rooms with a child's emotional comfort in mind rather than security protocols or convenience. They walked upstairs in silence, Maya carrying Sophia while Dante carried Isabella, their footsteps muffled by carpet so thick it felt like walking on clouds. The hallway of the east wing glowed with soft night lights, creating shadows that felt protective rather than ominous. Isabella's room was exactly what Maya would have expected for a 7-year-old girl with unlimited resources: a canopy bed draped in gauzy fabric, built-in bookshelves filled with classics and contemporary favorites, a window seat overlooking gardens that were probably spectacular in daylight. Dante laid his daughter down gently, removing her shoes and pulling a comforter up to her chin. "Sleep well, Stellina," he murmured in Italian, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You're safe now." In the guest suite next door, Maya tucked Sophia into the four-poster bed, her daughter barely stirring as she settled into sheets that felt like silk against skin. "Love you, Mama," Sophia mumbled, already half asleep. "Love you too, baby." Maya smoothed her daughter's hair back, emotion welling up as she considered how close she'd come to losing this, to Sophia being alone in the world, because Maya had interfered in something dangerous. When she turned, Dante stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "There's something you should know," he said quietly. "The men who tried to take Isabella today? They were arrested, but they'll be released on bail by morning. Their employer will ensure they disappear before they can testify about who hired them." "So they just get away with it?" Maya's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "They won't get far." Dante's voice carried cold certainty. "But their escape is useful. They'll lead us to whoever ordered the kidnapping. Sometimes you have to let the bait run before you can catch the bigger fish." Maya studied his face, seeing the predator beneath the protective father. "You're not just a businessman, are you? The imports and exports. That's not all you do." "No," Dante admitted, meeting her gaze without flinching. "It's not. I operate in spaces between legal and illegal, providing services that people need but can't obtain through legitimate channels. I have connections that extend from City Hall to the docks, from law enforcement to criminal organizations. I've built an empire that exists in shadows, and I've made enemies who would destroy everything I've created if they found the right leverage." "Isabella." "Isabella," he confirmed. "She's my one absolute vulnerability, the only thing in this world I would sacrifice everything to protect. Which is why whoever tried to take her today has signed their own death warrant. They just don't know it yet." The flat certainty in his voice should have terrified Maya. Instead, she found herself understanding the brutal logic of it, that in Dante's world, showing mercy to those who threatened his daughter would only invite more attacks. That justice operated by different rules when the legal system couldn't protect what mattered most. "I'm not asking you to approve of what I do," Dante continued. "I'm asking you to understand it. If you stay here, if you accept my offer, you'll be stepping into a world where violence is a tool and morality is complicated. I won't lie to you about that." Maya looked back at Sophia, sleeping peacefully in luxury she'd never imagined, safe in a way Maya had never been able to provide on her own. "And if I say no? If I take Sophia and walk away tomorrow? Then I'll respect that decision." Dante's hand braced against the doorframe, his body language betraying tension that his voice didn't show. "I'll maintain security at a distance. Make sure you're protected without being intrusive. Your life will return to normal, or as normal as it can be after today." But the job offer will disappear. The job offer is contingent on trust, Maya. I need someone in my home who understands the stakes and chooses to be here anyway. Someone who won't run at the first sign of danger or sell information to my enemies. That requires commitment that goes beyond an employment contract. Maya studied him in the soft lamplight. This dangerous man who'd just admitted to operating outside the law, who'd killed or ordered killings, who'd built an empire on foundations that would crumble under legal scrutiny. She should be terrified. Should grab Sophia and run as far and fast as possible. Instead, she heard herself ask, what exactly does this job entail? The real job, not the convenient cover story. Something shifted in Dante's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or cautious hope. Managing the household staff and coordinating schedules. Genuinely. But also being someone Isabella can trust. Someone who can be present in her life without hidden agendas or ulterior motives. Someone who understands that her safety comes before everything else and who has already proven they'll act to protect her. You want me to be her nanny? I want you to be her friend, Dante corrected gently. Someone who treats her like a normal child rather than a mafia princess to be feared or manipulated. Someone whose daughter can be the friend that Isabella desperately needs but can't have, because everyone in our circles comes with complications. The honesty of it struck Maya harder than any sales pitch could have. He wasn't just offering her a job, he was offering Isabella normalcy, or the closest approximation that a child in her position could achieve. I need to sleep on this, Maya said finally. Actually sleep. In a bed that isn't going to determine my entire future with my daughter because I'm too exhausted to think straight. Dante nodded, stepping back from the doorway. Of course. Take all the time you need. Mrs. Chen will have breakfast ready whenever you wake, and we can discuss details then. He paused, his hand on the door. Thank you, Maya. For today. For everything. Regardless of what you decide tomorrow. He left her alone in the guest suite, the door clicking shut with a soft finality. Maya stood in the center of the room, processing the conversation, the offer, the impossible choice between returning to her familiar struggle or stepping into this dangerous new world. Outside the window, Chicago sparkled with lights that marked millions of lives being lived in ignorance of the shadows between buildings, the power plays and territorial disputes that shaped their city without their knowledge. Maya had been one of those people this morning. Tonight, she stood on the threshold of something else entirely. She climbed into bed beside Sophia, her daughter's steady breathing a comfort in the unfamiliar surroundings. Sleep should have been impossible given everything racing through her mind. Instead, exhaustion claimed her almost immediately, pulling her down into dreams of grocery stores and black vans and dark eyes that promised both danger and protection in equal measure. Morning arrived with sunlight streaming through windows that faced east, turning the guest suite golden. Maya woke slowly, disoriented by the expensive sheets and the absence of traffic noise from the street below. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was, or why everything felt so different. Then memory crashed back. The kidnapping, Dante, the job offer that seemed too good to be true and probably was. Sophia's side of the bed was empty, the covers thrown back. Panic flared before Maya heard her daughter's laughter from somewhere downstairs, followed by Isabella's voice saying something that made both girls dissolve into giggles. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway holding a tray with coffee and fresh pastries that smelled like heaven. Good morning, she said with a warm smile. The girls are in the kitchen helping me prepare pancakes, which mostly means making a mess and eating chocolate chips. But they're happy. Mr. Romano asked me to let you know he's in his office handling some business but will join you for breakfast in 30 minutes. Maya accepted the coffee gratefully, taking a sip of something that tasted infinitely better than the instant coffee she usually choked down. Mrs. Chen, can I ask you something? Of course, dear. How long have you worked for Mr. Romano? 15 years, Mrs. Chen replied, settling into a chair near the window as if she'd been expecting the question. I started when his wife was still alive, when Isabella was just a baby. I've seen this family through its best days and its worst ones. And in all that time, has he ever offered someone a job the way he offered me one last night? Mrs. Chen's expression became thoughtful. Mr. Romano is very selective about who he allows into his inner circle. He has to be, given his circumstances. But I've never seen him extend an offer of this nature. No. Usually people work their way into trust over years. You've managed it in hours. Because I helped Isabella. Because you helped Isabella without knowing who she was, or who her father is, Mrs. Chen corrected gently. You acted out of pure instinct to protect a child. That kind of genuine goodness is rare in Mr. Romano's world. Rare enough that he's willing to take a chance on someone he barely knows. Maya absorbed this, staring into her coffee cup as if it might contain answers to questions she hadn't figured out how to ask. What was his wife like? Alessandra? Mrs. Chen's face softened with memory. She was sunshine in human form. Kind, generous, completely devoted to her family. She believed in Dante's essential goodness even when his choices took him down dark paths. She was the one who kept him grounded, who reminded him that power without purpose was just cruelty dressed up in expensive suits. How did she die? Breast cancer. Aggressive, resistant to treatment. We tried everything. Specialists from around the world, experimental therapies, alternative medicine. Dante spent millions trying to save her, but some fights can't be won with money. Mrs. Chen's eyes grew distant. The day she died, I watched something in him die too. He became harder, colder, threw himself into business to avoid processing grief. The only softness left in him was reserved for Isabella. Until yesterday. Mrs. Chen studied Maya with knowing eyes. Until yesterday, she agreed. When a stranger reminded him that goodness still exists in the world, and that sometimes it comes from the most unexpected places. The weight of that observation settled over Maya as she finished her coffee and dressed in clean clothes that had mysteriously appeared in her size. Mrs. Chen's efficiency, she assumed. By the time she made it downstairs, Sophia and Isabella had transformed the kitchen into what looked like a war zone, flour dusting every surface while a stack of surprisingly perfect pancakes grew on a platter. "Mama, we made breakfast," Sophia announced proudly, her face smudged with batter. "Mrs. Chen showed us how to flip them without using our hands." Isabella giggled, wielding a spatula with more enthusiasm than skill. "Papa usually burns toast, so this is much better." "My culinary failures have been greatly exaggerated." Dante's voice came from the kitchen entrance as he appeared, having changed into a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Maya's car. But his tie was slightly askew, and there was something softer about his expression as he surveyed the chaos his daughter had created. "Good morning," he said, his attention settling on Maya with an intensity that made her suddenly aware of her borrowed clothes and lack of makeup. "I hope you slept well." "Better than I expected," Maya admitted, watching Sophia and Isabella work together to flip another pancake. "Your guest room is very comfortable." "Good." Dante moved to the coffee maker with practiced ease, pouring himself a cup while maintaining polite distance. "I have some information about yesterday's incident if you'd like to discuss it after breakfast, or we can wait until the girls are occupied with other activities." The careful consideration in his tone, giving her choice about when to hear potentially disturbing news, struck Maya as surprisingly thoughtful for a man who supposedly ruled through intimidation and force. They ate breakfast in the informal dining area off the kitchen, a space that felt almost normal despite the expensive finishes and original artwork on the walls. The girls chattered about their plans for the day, having apparently decided that Sophia would stay long enough to see Isabella's collection of music boxes and maybe play in the gardens if the weather stayed nice. Dante caught Maya's eye across the table, a silent question in his expression. She nodded slightly, understanding that he was asking permission for their daughters to become friends, for this arrangement to continue at least through today. After breakfast, Mrs. Chen whisked the girls away to clean up the kitchen mess, leaving Maya and Dante alone in his office, a masculine space of dark wood and leather that somehow managed to feel welcoming rather than oppressive. Garcia completed his investigation. Dante began without preamble, opening a folder on his desk. The two men from yesterday were hired through an intermediary, paid in cash, given basic information about Isabella's schedule, and told to grab her during her window between school dismissal and when my security usually arrives. Usually? Maya caught the word. You weren't there yesterday? I was handling a crisis at the port. A shipment had been delayed, and I needed to manage it personally. Dante's jaw tightened. Someone knew my schedule well enough to know I'd be occupied, well enough to know that 15-minute gap existed where Isabella would be vulnerable. An inside job. That's my assessment. He slid a photograph across the desk, a middle-aged man with thinning hair and nervous eyes. Paul Winters, my logistics coordinator for the past 7 years. Garcia found evidence that he's been in contact with the Moretti family, my primary competitors for control of the shipping routes. They've been trying to expand their territory for years, but I've blocked every attempt. So they decided to kidnap your daughter to force your hand. Or to distract me while they made other moves. Dante's fingers drummed against his desk, a tell of agitation that seemed at odds with his controlled demeanor. Either way, Winters betrayed me, and in my world, betrayal has only one consequence. Maya didn't need him to elaborate on what that consequence would be. What about the men watching my apartment? Moretti's people, keeping tabs on loose ends. They don't know yet if you can identify them or if you're just a random cashier who got lucky. But they're cautious, which means they'll eventually decide you're a liability that needs to be eliminated. The casual way he discussed her potential murder should have been shocking. Instead, Maya found herself analyzing it with the same practical mindset she'd developed for balancing impossible budgets. Threat identified, solution required, emotion set aside until the immediate crisis was resolved. So I can't go home. Not safely. Not until I've resolved the Moretti situation. Dante leaned back in his chair, studying her with that penetrating gaze. Which brings us back to my offer from last night. Have you had time to consider it? Maya had considered it through most of her restless sleep, weighing practicality against pride, safety against independence. I have conditions. Something that might have been respect flickered in Dante's eyes. I'm listening. First, this is a real job. I work for my salary. I don't accept handouts. If I'm not meeting expectations, you tell me directly and we renegotiate, or I leave. Agreed. Second, Sophia's safety is non-negotiable. If staying here puts her in danger, real danger, not theoretical possibility, I take her and we leave immediately. No arguments. Also agreed, though I'd argue she's safer here than anywhere else in Chicago. Third, Maya hesitated. Knowing this, next part was crucial. I need to understand what I'm really agreeing to. Not the sanitized version, not the convenient half-truths. If I'm going to work for you, live in your house, let my daughter become friends with yours, I need to know exactly who you are and what you do. Dante was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stood, moving to a wall panel that looked like decorative woodwork. He pressed a hidden catch, and the panel swung open to reveal a room Maya hadn't known existed, a command center with multiple monitors, communications equipment, and enough technology to run a small military operation. This is who I am, he said quietly, gesturing for her to enter. And what I do. Maya stepped into the hidden room, her eyes adjusting to the blue glow of monitors displaying shipping routes, surveillance footage from various locations around the city, and what looked like encrypted communications. This was the nerve center of Dante's empire, the place where he monitored and controlled operations that extended far beyond legitimate imports and exports. I run the largest smuggling operation on the eastern seaboard, Dante said, his voice matter of fact. Pharmaceuticals primarily, though I've been known to move other goods when the price is right and the risk is acceptable. I have customs officials on my payroll, police who look the other way, politicians who find my campaign contributions very persuasive. I've killed 7 men personally and ordered the deaths of at least 20 more who threatened my family or my business. He turned to face her directly, and Maya saw no shame in his expression, just cold assessment of facts. I'm not a good man by most definitions. I've broken laws, hurt people, built wealth on the suffering of those addicted to what I sell. The only line I won't cross is children. I don't traffic in people, I don't sell to minors, and I don't allow my associates to target the innocent. But that doesn't make me a hero. It just makes me a criminal with a conscience that has very specific boundaries. Maya absorbed this, comparing the confession to the man who'd gently carried his sleeping daughter to bed, who'd worried about her nightmares, who'd offered Maya protection without expecting anything in return. The contradiction was dizzying, monster and father existing in the same person, separated by such thin margins that she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. "Why tell me this?" she asked finally. "Why not let me believe the convenient fiction?" "Because you asked for the truth," Dante replied simply. "And because if you're going to be in my life, in Isabella's life, you deserve to make that choice with full knowledge of what it means. I won't trap you with lies or half-truths, Maya. You walk into this with your eyes open, or you don't walk into it at all." Maya studied the monitors, watching shipping containers being loaded onto trucks, seeing surveillance footage of men she didn't recognize conducting business in locations she couldn't identify. This was Dante's world, efficient, ruthless, operating in shadows that most people never noticed. "My husband was a good man," she said quietly, surprising herself with the confession. "A teacher who believed in making a difference, who spent his own money on supplies for students who couldn't afford them. He died because a drunk driver ran a red light, and the driver had expensive lawyers who got him off with a suspended license and community service. No jail time, no real consequences, just a slap on the wrist for ending a good man's life." She turned to face Dante, meeting his gaze with steady determination. "I learned something from that. The world isn't fair. Justice doesn't always come through proper channels. Sometimes the people who follow all the rules get crushed while those who break them thrive. I don't like that reality, but I've stopped pretending it doesn't exist." "So you'll stay?" "I'll stay," Maya confirmed. "Not because I approve of what you do, but because I've seen who you are when it matters. You protected Isabella with everything you had. You're protecting me and Sophia now without expecting anything in return except maybe trust. That's more than most good men would do." Dante's expression shifted. Relief, perhaps, or something deeper that he quickly masked. "There will be moments when you question this decision, when you see things that disturb you, when the reality of what I do becomes impossible to ignore. When those moments come, you can walk away. The job offer includes a severance package that will cover 6 months of expenses, enough time for you to find something else and get settled. You're building in an escape clause. I'm ensuring you never feel trapped." He moved closer, and Maya caught the scent of his cologne mixed with something else. Coffee and expensive leather and the faint metallic tang that might have been gun oil. "I won't be the man who forces you to choose between safety and conscience. If you stay, it's because you want to be here. And if you leave, it's with enough resources to land on your feet." The consideration in that offer, the respect for her autonomy even as he brought her into his world, it spoke to the contradiction that was Dante Romano. Criminal and protector. Killer and father. Monster and man. I should check on Sophia, Maya said, needing space to process everything she'd just learned. Make sure she and Isabella haven't destroyed any other rooms. They're in the music room, Dante said, closing the hidden panel to conceal his command center. Isabella is showing Sophia her piano. Fair warning, my daughter is very enthusiastic but not particularly skilled. You may want to prepare for interesting interpretations of Mozart. Despite everything, Maya smiled. Sophia once tried to play chopsticks on a department store keyboard and got asked to leave. I think I can handle enthusiastic piano. She left the office following the sound of determined but discordant music to a sun-filled room where a grand piano dominated the space. Isabella sat at the keys, her face scrunched in concentration, while Sophia stood beside her, calling out encouragement. That's really good, Sophia insisted, as Isabella murdered what might have been Mary had a little lamb. You're like a real pianist. Papa says I'm getting better, Isabella replied, her fingers finding slightly more accurate notes. He says, if I practice every day for 10 years, I might be almost adequate. Your father sounds realistic about musical ability, Maya observed from the doorway, earning a giggle from both girls. He says the same thing about his cooking, Isabella confided. But Mrs. Chen won't let him in the kitchen anymore after he set the smoke alarm off trying to make eggs. The afternoon passed with surprising ease as Maya explored the house with the girls, discovering libraries and sitting rooms and a greenhouse where Mrs. Chen grew herbs for cooking. Dante appeared periodically, checking on them with the careful attention of someone who'd learned that leaving his daughter alone, even in his own home, was a luxury he couldn't afford. By evening, when the girls were settled in front of another movie, Dante found Maya on the terrace overlooking the gardens, where Chicago's skyline glittered in the distance like a promise of possibility. Garcia confirmed that Winters has disappeared, he said without preamble, probably heading for Moretti's protection, thinking he'll be safe there. Will he be? No. The single word carried absolute certainty. Moretti will use him and discard him when he's no longer useful. That's how these things work. Betrayal is currency in my world, but it's currency that spends only once. Maya watched lights flicker in windows across the city, each one marking a life being lived in ignorance of the power plays and territorial disputes that shaped their reality. When you eliminate Winters and resolve the Moretti situation, what happens to me and Sophia? Do we stay? That's entirely your choice. Dante moved to stand beside her at the railing, close enough that she could feel heat radiating from his body despite the October chill. The job offer stands regardless of whether external threats exist. I genuinely need help managing this household, and Isabella genuinely needs what you and Sophia provide: normalcy, friendship, the chance to be a child rather than a target. And you? Maya asked, surprised by her own boldness. What do you need? Dante was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, so softly, she almost missed it. Someone who sees both sides and chooses to stay anyway. Someone who understands that I'm capable of terrible things but recognizes that I'm trying to be better for my daughter's sake. Someone who doesn't run when things get complicated. Maya turned to face him directly, studying the man who'd somehow become central to her life in less than 24 hours. I'm not running, she said firmly. Sophia and I will stay. We'll take your job, live in your house, be part of Isabella's life. And in return, you'll be honest with me. No more secrets than necessary, no convenient omissions. If something affects me or my daughter, I need to know. Agreed. Dante extended his hand, the gesture formal despite the intimacy of their conversation. Welcome to the family, Maya Rodriguez. She took his hand, feeling calluses earned through violence against her softer skin. The contrast should have disturbed her. Instead, it felt like a promise. That his strength would protect what she couldn't defend alone, that her goodness might soften edges sharpened by years of brutality. Their hands remained clasped for a moment longer than strictly necessary, and Maya felt the shift between them. Something beyond employer and employee, beyond protector and protected. Something that felt dangerous and inevitable in equal measure. From inside the house, Sophia's laughter rang out, followed by Isabella's delighted squeal. The sound pulled them both back to the present, to their daughters who'd somehow found friendship despite impossible circumstances. I should get them ready for bed, Maya said, reluctantly withdrawing her hand. Tomorrow, we can discuss the actual details of this job and figure out logistics. Tomorrow, Dante agreed, but his eyes held a promise that suggested their conversation was far from over. Maya returned to the house, to her daughter and this new life she'd somehow stumbled into. Behind her, Dante remained on the terrace, a silhouette against the city lights, powerful and dangerous and unexpectedly gentle in ways that made her heart race with possibility. The collision of their worlds was complete. Now came the harder part, learning to live in the space they'd created, where grocery store cashiers became household managers and mafia bosses became something that looked almost like family. 3 weeks passed like water finding its level, reshaping the landscape of Maya's life in ways both profound and surprisingly mundane. She woke each morning in the guest suite that had become her suite, sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked gardens she now helped maintain. Sophia adapted to her new school, a private academy where Isabella's recommendation had secured her a scholarship, with the resilience of children who haven't yet learned that radical change should be frightening. Maya fell into the rhythm of managing Dante's household with an efficiency that surprised them both. She coordinated staff schedules, managed household accounts, planned meals with Mrs. Chen, and somehow found time to ensure both girls completed homework before their elaborate games, transform the library into whatever imaginary kingdom currently captured their attention. But beneath the domestic routine, tension simmered. Dante's investigation into Paul Winters and the Moretti family continued with methodical precision. Men in expensive suits appeared at odd hours for meetings behind closed doors. Phone calls came that made Dante's expression harden into something cold and lethal before he'd excuse himself and disappear into his hidden command center. Maya learned to read the signs, the tension in his shoulders that meant someone had betrayed him, the tightness around his eyes that suggested threats were escalating. The rare moments when he'd stand in Isabella's doorway watching her sleep, as if memorizing her face against future loss. "You're worried," Maya observed one evening after the girls had gone to bed. She'd found Dante in his office, staring at surveillance footage with the focused intensity of someone searching for answers in shadows. Winters resurfaced in Detroit, Dante said without looking away from the screens. He's been making contact with Moretti's associates there, offering information about my operations in exchange for protection. He doesn't realize that Moretti views him as a useful idiot rather than a valuable asset. Maya settled into the chair across from his desk, having learned over the past weeks that Dante sometimes needed to talk through problems aloud. "What kind of information?" "Shipping schedules, routes we use, which officials are on our payroll." Dante finally turned to face her, exhaustion evident in the lines around his eyes. Enough to cause significant disruption if Moretti acts on it. Not enough to actually damage my core operations, but he doesn't know that. I've been feeding Winters misinformation through channels he thinks are secure. So when Moretti makes his move based on bad intelligence, he'll expose his own operations in the process, Dante finished. His people will hit targets that don't exist while mine secure his actual assets. By the time he realizes he's been played, I'll control enough of his territory that he'll have no choice but to negotiate. The strategic elegance of it was almost beautiful, if Maya ignored the violence implicit in phrases like hit targets and secure assets. She'd learned not to ask for details about the bloodier aspects of Dante's work, not out of willful ignorance, but because knowing specifics wouldn't change anything except her ability to sleep at night. "How long?" she asked instead. 72 hours. Maybe less. Dante stood, moving to the window that overlooked the gardens now silver with moonlight. Once Moretti makes his play and realizes he's been outmaneuvered, there will be a period of chaos. Retribution attempts, desperate moves by his remaining loyalists. It could get dangerous. More dangerous than kidnapping attempts in grocery store parking lots? Despite the tension, Dante's mouth quirked in something approaching a smile. Point taken. But this will be different. Coordinated rather than opportunistic. I'm moving you and the girls to the safe house in Lake Forest tomorrow, just until the immediate fallout settles. Maya should have argued, should have insisted that running away wasn't the solution. Instead, she found herself analyzing the practicality. Lake Forest was an hour north. Isolated enough for security but close enough for Dante to visit. The girls could continue their schoolwork remotely for a few days. Mrs. Chen could accompany them to maintain routine. How long will we be there? A week at most. Just long enough for me to clean up the mess and ensure there are no viable threats remaining. Dante turned back to face her, and in the low lighting he looked younger somehow. Less the dangerous crime lord, and more the exhausted father trying to protect what mattered most. I know this disrupts the stability you've been building for Sophia. I'm sorry for that. Don't apologize for keeping us safe. Maya stood, crossing to where he stood by the window. That was part of our agreement. You protect us. I trust you to know when protection is necessary. They stood closer than they probably should, the space between them charged with something that had been building since that first night. Maya had felt it in small moments, when their hands brushed passing documents, when his eyes lingered on her face during dinner, when she'd catch him watching her read to the girls with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. Maya. Her name on his lips sounded different than when anyone else said it, weighted with meaning she wasn't quite ready to examine. These past weeks, having you here, watching you with Isabella, the way you've transformed this house into something that feels like a home, rather than a fortress. His phone buzzed, shattering the moment. Dante glanced at the screen, his expression shifting instantly from vulnerable to lethal. It's starting, he said simply. Moretti's people are moving on the warehouses Winters identified. Garcia's team is already in position. The next hours unfolded with military precision. Dante coordinated from his command center while Maya packed essentials for the girls, trying to move quietly enough not to wake them. Mrs. Chen appeared like a ghost, already prepared with provisions and contingency plans that suggested she'd lived through this kind of emergency before. The car will be ready in 20 minutes, she said calmly, as if midnight evacuations were routine. Anthony will drive you. 4 additional security personnel will follow in a separate vehicle. Mr. Romano has provided you with a secure phone. Use it only to contact him or emergency services. Maya accepted the phone, its weight feeling disproportionate to its size. What about Dante? Will he be safe? Mrs. Chen's expression softened. Mr. Romano has survived worse than the Moretti family. He'll be fine. But he won't be able to focus properly if he's worried about Isabella's safety. Getting her out of the city is as much about giving him freedom to do what needs to be done as it is about protecting her. The girls woke confused and sleepy when Maya carried Sophia to the car. Isabella clung to her father, whispering something in Italian that made his eyes close briefly before he responded in the same language, his voice rough with emotion. Be good for Maya, he told his daughter in English, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I'll come see you as soon as it's safe. I promise, Stellina. You promise you'll be careful too? Isabella's voice trembled, betraying fear she was trying to hide. I promise. Dante's hands cupped his daughter's face with infinite gentleness. Now go. Anthony is waiting, and the longer we delay, the harder this becomes. He caught Maya's eyes over Isabella's head, and something passed between them. Trust, perhaps, or the acknowledgement that she was leaving with the most precious thing in his world, that he was putting his daughter's safety in her hands and believing she wouldn't fail him. The drive to Lake Forest passed in tense silence, broken only by the girls' eventual return to sleep, their heads resting together in the back seat. Maya watched Chicago's skyline recede through the rear window, wondering what was unfolding in the shadows they were leaving behind. The safe house revealed itself as a sprawling estate on Lake Michigan's shore, surrounded by walls that looked decorative but were topped with subtle security measures. Inside, it was comfortable without being ostentatious, a place designed for hiding rather than impressing. "Get some sleep," Anthony advised as he conducted a security sweep. "I'll wake you if there's any change in status. Mr. Romano will call when the immediate situation is resolved." Maya tried to sleep, but every creak of the house settling made her startle awake. She finally gave up around dawn, making coffee in the unfamiliar kitchen while watching sunrise paint the lake in shades of gold and rose. Her secure phone buzzed with a text from Dante. "Primary objectives secured. Moretti's warehouse network is ours. Minor complications, but nothing we can't handle." "How are the girls?" Maya responded. "Still sleeping. House is secure. We're fine. Are you safe?" The reply came quickly. "Safe enough. This will take another day to fully resolve. Miss you." Those last two words made Maya's breath catch. Simple, direct, and completely unexpected. She stared at them for a long moment before typing, "Miss you too. Come home soon." The day passed with strange normalcy. The girls woke and explored their temporary home with enthusiasm, discovering a game room and a small theater and grounds large enough to run wild while security maintained discreet distance. Mrs. Chen produced meals that made even exile feel comfortable. But Maya felt the absence like a physical thing. The lack of Dante's presence at dinner, the missing sound of his voice discussing the day's events, the empty space where he should have been reading to Isabella before bed. "When is Papa coming?" Isabella asked that evening, her brave facade cracking to reveal the scared child underneath. "He promised he'd be careful, but promises don't always mean people come home. Mama promised too, and she didn't." Maya's heart broke at the raw fear in the girl's voice. She pulled Isabella close, Sophia automatically joining the embrace in the intuitive way children have of knowing when comfort is needed. "Your papa is very good at keeping promises," Maya said firmly. "And he has excellent people protecting him. He'll come home, Isabella. I believe that completely." "How do you know?" "Because he loves you too much to let anything stop him from coming back. And because—" Maya paused, realizing the truth of what she was about to say. "Because I won't accept any other outcome. Your father is going to walk through that door. He's going to scoop you up and tell you everything is okay, and we're all going to go home together." The certainty in her voice seemed to comfort Isabella more than empty platitudes would have. The girls eventually settled into sleep in the room they'd chosen to share, their hands clasped beneath the covers like anchors keeping each other grounded. Maya's phone buzzed at nearly midnight. Moretti agreed to terms. "His remaining operations are being absorbed into mine. Winters has been located. Everything is resolved." Relief flooded through her so intensely it left her shaking. "When are you coming?" "Now. Be there in an hour." Maya changed out of her pajamas without quite admitting to herself why presentation suddenly mattered. She was waiting in the foyer when headlights swept through the windows, her heart racing as engines cut and doors opened. Dante entered looking like he'd aged a decade in 2 days, his suit rumpled, a bruise darkening his jaw, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. But he was whole, breathing, alive. Their eyes met across the distance and Maya moved without thinking, crossing the space between them. He caught her when she reached him, his arms coming around her with desperate strength as she pressed her face against his chest, breathing in the scent of him mixed with gun oil and exhaustion and the faint copper tang of violence. "You're okay," she whispered against his shirt. You're really okay. I promised I'd be careful. His voice rumbled through his chest where her ear rested. I keep my promises, Maya. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the shadowed foyer, while his security team discreetly disappeared to give them privacy. Maya felt the adrenaline crash hitting him, felt how tightly he held her, as if she were the anchor keeping him from drifting into darker waters. Isabella? He asked finally. Asleep upstairs with Sophia. She was worried about you. We all were. I need to see her. I need to. His voice cracked slightly, revealing the fear he'd been carrying beneath his controlled exterior. Go, Maya said, pulling back to look at his bruised face. She needs to see you too, to know you kept your promise. Dante pressed a kiss to Maya's forehead, brief, chaste, but weighted with meaning, before heading upstairs with the urgency of a father who'd spent 2 days terrified he'd never see his daughter again. Maya followed more slowly, arriving at the doorway in time to see Dante kneel beside the bed where Isabella slept. He smoothed her hair back with shaking hands, his shoulders trembling with silent emotion as he watched her peaceful breathing. Isabella's eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on her father's face. Papa? She whispered, still half asleep. You came back. I'll always come back, Stellina. Dante's voice was rough with unshed tears. Always. Nothing in this world could keep me from you. Isabella threw her arms around his neck, and Dante lifted her from the bed, cradling her against his chest while she cried into his shoulder, fear and relief pouring out in the safety of her father's embrace. I was so scared, Isabella sobbed. I thought they might hurt you. I thought you might not come home like Mama didn't come home. I'm here. I'm safe. Everything is okay now. Dante's hand moved in soothing circles on her back, his eyes closing as he held his daughter like she was the only thing keeping him grounded. The bad men can't hurt us anymore. We're safe, baby. We're all safe. Sophia had woken during the commotion, watching the reunion with wide eyes. Mr. Romano came back, she whispered to Maya, stating the obvious with a child's need to confirm reality. He kept his promise like you said. He did, Maya confirmed, her own eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. He always will. Eventually, Isabella's tears subsided and exhaustion reclaimed her. Dante tucked her back into bed beside Sophia, pressing a kiss to both girls' foreheads before finally allowing himself to leave the room. In the hallway, he sagged against the wall, the controlled facade finally crumbling. Maya caught him as his knees buckled, her arms supporting him despite their size difference, her strength born from sheer determination rather than physical power. Come on, she said softly. You need food, medical attention for that bruise, and about 12 hours of sleep. I need. Dante stopped, seeming to realize he didn't actually know what he needed beyond what he'd already found. His daughter safe, this woman supporting him, the crushing weight of responsibility temporarily shared rather than borne alone. Mrs. Chen appeared with her usual perfect timing, carrying a tray of food and a first aid kit. The guest room is prepared, Mr. Romano. Eat, let Maya tend your injuries, then sleep. Everything else can wait until morning. Dante nodded, allowing himself to be guided to the guest room like a child rather than a crime lord who'd just absorbed his rival's empire. Maya settled him into a chair, examining the bruise on his jaw with gentle fingers. It's not broken, she assessed, having learned basic first aid from years of poverty where doctors were luxuries. But it's going to hurt like hell. Tomorrow, ice will help. I've had worse. Dante caught her hand as she reached for the ice pack, his thumb tracing circles on her wrist. Maya, these past 2 days, not knowing if I'd make it back, thinking about everything I'd leave unsaid. Don't. Maya pressed her fingers to his lips, stopping the confession before it could complicate everything. You're exhausted, running on adrenaline and fear. Whatever you need to say can wait until you've slept and can think clearly. What if I don't want to wait? His hand came up to cup her face, his eyes searching hers with intensity that made her breath catch. What if I'm tired of being careful, of pretending I don't feel something every time you walk into a room? What if I want to be honest about the fact that somewhere between you saving my daughter and now, you became essential to my life in ways that have nothing to do with household management? Maya's heart hammered against her ribs as she processed his words. She should pull away, should maintain the professional distance that had kept their relationship safely categorized. Instead, she heard herself whisper, "What if I feel the same way and it terrifies me?" Why terrified? Because you're Dante Romano. Because I'm just a grocery store cashier who got lucky. Because this whole situation is insane and temporary and built on circumstances that shouldn't exist. Because I have a daughter to think about, and getting involved with you means accepting a world where people get kidnapped and midnight evacuations are necessary. The words tumbled out in a rush, all her fears laid bare. "You're not just anything," Dante said firmly, his hand still cradling her face with infinite gentleness. "You're the woman who risked herself to save a stranger's child, who stepped into my world with her eyes open and chose to stay anyway. Who makes my daughter laugh and my house feel like a home? Who holds me together when I'm falling apart? You're extraordinary, Maya, and the fact that you can't see it makes you even more so." "I'm scared," Maya admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared of needing you, of Sophia needing you, of building something that could be taken away." "I'm scared too." The confession seemed to cost him something. "I'm terrified of caring about someone again, of giving my heart to another person who could leave through death or choice, or any of the thousand ways people disappear from our lives. But I'm more terrified of pushing you away and spending the rest of my life wondering what we could have been." Maya closed the distance between them, her lips finding his in a kiss that felt like coming home and leaping off a cliff simultaneously. Dante responded with desperate tenderness, one hand tangling in her hair while the other pulled her closer, as if proximity could somehow make this moment more real, more permanent. They broke apart breathless, foreheads resting together while they processed what had just shifted irrevocably between them. "We should take this slowly," Maya said, even as her hands remained fisted in his shirt. "For the girls' sake, if nothing else. They're already attached to each other. If we rush into something and it falls apart, then we'll be careful," Dante agreed. "Slow, deliberate, making sure every step is solid before we take the next one. But Maya, I want those next steps. With you. With Sophia. I want to build something real and lasting with the family we've accidentally created." "Family?" Maya repeated, testing the word. "Is that what we are? Isn't it?" Dante's smile was soft, genuine, the expression transforming his face into something younger and less guarded. "Two single parents, two daughters who've become inseparable, living under one roof and navigating impossible circumstances together. If that's not family, I don't know what is." The truth of it settled over Maya like a blanket, warm and comforting despite its weight. They had become a family, assembled from broken pieces and desperate circumstances, and the raw courage it took to open yourself to connection when loss had taught you how much it could hurt. "Okay," she said finally. "We'll try this. Slowly, carefully, with our daughter's well-being as the priority. But Dante, I need you to promise me something." "Anything?" "Promise me you'll always be honest. About the dangers, about what you're involved in, about anything that could affect me or Sophia. I can handle scary truths. I can't handle comforting lies that fall apart when I need them most. I promise." Dante sealed it with another kiss, softer this time, sweet, rather than desperate. "No lies, No convenient omissions. You get the truth, even when it's ugly. They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet guest room while Lake Michigan whispered against the shore outside. Finally, Maya pulled away with gentle firmness. Now eat something and sleep. Tomorrow we can figure out what comes next. But tonight, you need to rest. Dante obeyed with surprising docility, eating the meal Mrs. Chen had provided before collapsing onto the bed still fully clothed. Maya pulled a blanket over him, watching as exhaustion claimed him almost instantly, his face smoothing into something peaceful despite the bruises. She should have left then, should have returned to her own room. Instead, she settled into the chair beside the bed, keeping watch over this dangerous man who'd somehow become her future, making sure he kept breathing, kept being the father Isabella needed, and the man Maya was beginning to need just as much. Morning brought clarity and continuation. They returned to Chicago as a unit. Dante and Isabella, Maya and Sophia, the household staff who'd helped orchestrate their safety, resuming routines that now felt permanent rather than temporary. The following weeks unfolded with careful attention to the promise they'd made. Dante courted Maya the way men from another era might have, with flowers that appeared on her desk, with books he thought she'd enjoy, with quiet conversations after the girls slept that revealed layers beneath his controlled exterior. Maya discovered that Dante could be surprisingly funny when he wasn't managing crises, that he had strong opinions about classical music and terrible taste in action movies, that he'd wanted to be an architect before his father's death had pulled him into the family business at 19. He learned that Maya had studied art history before financial reality had forced her into work that paid bills rather than fed passions, that she collected smooth stones from beaches and kept them in her pockets like talismans, that she sang off-key while cooking and didn't care who heard. Their daughters watched the developing relationship with the shrewd awareness of children who'd learned to read adults for survival. Isabella asked pointed questions about whether Maya would be staying forever. Sophia wanted to know if Mr. Romano might someday be more than just her friend's father. 3 months after that first desperate kiss, Dante took Maya to dinner at a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a name, just an address that insiders knew. Over wine that cost more than her old monthly rent, he reached across the table to take her hand. "I've been thinking about the future," he said, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm, "about what we're building and where it might lead." And? Maya's heart raced, though she tried to keep her voice steady. "And I think we should make it official. Not rushing, not forcing anything, but acknowledging what's already true. That you and Sophia are part of my family. That Isabella needs you both. That I need you in ways I didn't think I'd ever need anyone again." "What exactly are you proposing?" Dante smiled at her choice of words. "Not that. Not yet. We promised to take things slowly, and I intend to keep that promise. But I am proposing that you stop thinking of the East Wing as temporary housing and start considering it your permanent home. That we enroll Sophia at Westbridge Academy officially, rather than through the guest student program. That we tell our daughters what they already know, that we're a family, and families stay together." Maya studied his face, seeing the vulnerability beneath the confident businessman exterior. "You're asking me to commit to this life, to accept that my daughter will grow up surrounded by security details and midnight evacuations, that she'll learn to navigate a world where her guardian operates outside the law." "I'm asking you to commit to me," Dante corrected gently. "The rest comes with the package, yes. But at its core, I'm asking if you trust me enough to build a life together, to let me love you the way you deserve to be loved, to let our daughters grow up as sisters, to make permanent what started as desperate circumstance." The waiter appeared with their entrees, providing a moment for Maya to process. When they were alone, again she met Dante's eyes with clear determination. "I want to visit my husband's grave," she said, the request seemingly random. I haven't been able to afford flowers in months, and I need to tell him about this. About you. About the life we're building. He deserves to know that Sophia and I are okay, that we found something good in the chaos. Understanding flickered in Dante's expression. Of course. Tomorrow, if you'd like. I'll arrange everything. Just you and me, Maya specified. The girls can stay with Mrs. Chen. This is something I need to do with just you there. The next day dawned clear and cold, autumn giving way to early winter. Dante drove them to the cemetery himself. No security detail, no armored SUV, just his personal car, and the two of them navigating toward closure. Maya stood before her husband's headstone, simple granite that was all she'd been able to afford, and felt Dante's presence at her back, solid and patient. "Hi, baby," she whispered to the stone. "I'm sorry it's been so long. Money's been tight. You know how it is." She paused, gathering courage. "I met someone. His name is Dante, and he's complicated, but he's good to Sophia, and he makes me feel safe for the first time since you died. I think you'd like him. Or maybe you'd hate him for being everything you weren't. Dangerous and powerful and operating in shadows. But he protects us. And after 3 years of barely surviving, that means everything." Tears tracked down her face as she continued. "I'll always love you. You were my first love, my good man, the father of my daughter. But I'm choosing to move forward, to build something new with someone who showed up at the right moment and decided we were worth protecting. I hope wherever you are, you understand. I hope you're okay with me being happy again." Dante stepped forward, placing the enormous bouquet of white roses he'd brought at the base of the headstone. "I'll take care of them," he said quietly, addressing the stone with unexpected respect. "Your wife and daughter. I'll keep them safe, give them the life they deserve, and never let them forget how much you love them. You have my word." Maya turned into his arms, sobbing against his chest while he held her through the grief and relief and complicated emotions that came with letting go of one love to embrace another. When her tears finally subsided, Dante tilted her face up to his. "I love you, Maya Rodriguez. I'm in love with you. And when you're ready, months from now, years from now, whenever feels right, I'm going to ask you to marry me. But for now, I just need you to know that you're it for me. You and Sophia, you're my family. You're my future." "I love you too," Maya whispered, the words feeling like freedom rather than commitment. "And yes, I'm ready to make this permanent. The house, the life, all of it. We're yours, Dante. Completely." They sealed it with a kiss in the cemetery where Maya's past rested, honoring what was while embracing what would be. 6 months later, the house on the hill transformed for a celebration. Not a wedding. They were saving that for when both girls were old enough to participate fully, but an adoption ceremony where Dante would officially become Sophia's legal guardian and Maya would become Isabella's legal mother. The girls wore matching dresses they'd chosen together, chattering excitedly about becoming real sisters, as if the bond they'd formed wasn't already more real than most blood connections. Mrs. Chen supervised the catering with her usual efficiency, while Anthony's security team maintained discreet presence. The ceremony itself was simple: a judge who owed Dante favors, paperwork that made official what had been true for months, signatures that bound them legally as well as emotionally. "Do you, Maya Rodriguez, accept full parental responsibility for Isabella Romano?" the judge intoned. "I do," Maya said firmly, looking at the girl who'd become her daughter in all the ways that mattered. "And do you, Dante Romano, accept full parental responsibility for Sofia Rodriguez?" "I do." Dante's voice carried absolute certainty as he smiled at the girl who'd brought light into his life simply by being loved by her extraordinary mother. The judge pronounced them a legal family, and the girls cheered while the assembled witnesses, A small group of trusted friends and staff applauded. Dante pulled Maya into his arms for a kiss that made their daughters giggle, and Mrs. Chen dab at her eyes with a handkerchief. That evening, after the celebration had wound down and the girls were finally asleep, Dante found Maya on the terrace where they'd had their first real conversation about the future. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small velvet box that made Maya's breath catch. "Dante, we said we said we'd wait for marriage until the girls were older and could be full participants." He interrupted gently. "This isn't a proposal. It's a promise." He opened the box to reveal a ring. Not an engagement ring, but a band of platinum set with diamonds that caught the moonlight and threw it back in fractured rainbows. "A promise ring," Maya said, understanding washing over her. "Like teenagers give each other." Exactly like that. Dante's smile was soft, genuine. "A promise that when the time is right, when both girls can stand beside us as witnesses, I'm going to ask you properly. And a promise that until then and forever after, you're mine and I'm yours. Family, partners, the team that takes on the world together." He slipped the ring onto her right hand, reserving the left for the engagement ring that would come later. And Maya marveled at how perfectly it fit, as if it had been made for her specifically. "I promise too," she said, pulling him close, "to love you, to protect our daughters, to build this impossible, beautiful life we've somehow created from grocery store parking lots and desperate courage." They stood together, under Chicago's stars, two people who'd found each other through chaos and chosen to stay through everything that followed. Behind them, the house glowed with warm light, filled with the laughter of children who'd become sisters and the love of a family, assembled from broken pieces into something whole. The city sprawled below them, ignorant of the power plays and territorial disputes that shaped its reality. But up here on the hill, in this mansion that had once been a fortress and was now a home, none of that mattered as much as the simple truth they'd discovered. Sometimes salvation comes from unexpected places. Sometimes courage looks like a cashier writing a desperate note. Sometimes family chooses you rather than the other way around. And sometimes love finds you in a parking lot on a Tuesday afternoon, when you're brave enough to see a child in danger and strong enough to believe that one small action can change everything. Maya had saved Isabella that day, but in doing so, she'd saved herself and her daughter too, pulling them all from lives of isolation and struggle into something better, stronger, filled with the complicated beauty of chosen family and hard-won love. The future stretched before them, uncertain but no longer frightening. Together, they would face whatever came, the threats that still existed in Dante's world, the challenges of raising daughters in complicated circumstances, the thousand small moments that would build their life together. But tonight, they simply stood in each other's arms while their daughters slept safely above them and allowed themselves to believe that happy endings weren't just fairy tales. Sometimes, with courage and luck, and the willingness to take impossible chances on people who needed saving as much as they needed to save, they were simply the beginning of something real. Epilogue. 2 years later, on a perfect spring afternoon, the gardens of the house on the hill transformed into something magical. White roses climbed arbors while string lights waited to illuminate the coming evening. Chairs arranged in neat rows faced an altar where a minister stood ready to officiate. Isabella and Sophia served as dual maids of honor, their matching dresses a soft blush pink that complemented the flowers they carried. At 13 and 11, respectively, they took their responsibilities seriously, making sure everything was perfect for the wedding they'd been anticipating since the adoption ceremony. Maya stood in her room, truly her room now, shared with Dante for over a year, studying her reflection. The dress was simple but elegant, ivory lace over silk that moved like water. Nothing like the elaborate confection she'd worn at 19 when she'd married her first husband. This was better. Refined, mature, chosen by a woman who knew herself and what she wanted. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, her eyes suspiciously bright. "It's time," she said softly. "Mr. Romano is waiting at the altar, and I've never seen him so nervous. It's quite endearing, actually." Maya laughed, the sound free and genuine. Dante Romano, nervous. Who would have imagined? A man in love. Mrs. Chen said simply. They're always nervous when what they want most is finally within reach. The ceremony passed in a blur of emotion. Maya walked down the aisle without anyone giving her away. She was her own person, choosing this freely, needing no one's permission to claim her happiness. Dante's expression when he saw her made every uncertainty worth it, his eyes shining with unshed tears that he didn't bother hiding. Their vows were simple, honest, stripped of traditional language in favor of personal truth. "I promise to protect you and our daughters with everything I have," Dante said, his voice steady despite emotion. "To be honest even when honesty is hard. To choose you every day in every circumstance, for the rest of my life. You saved me, Maya. You saved all of us. And I will spend forever grateful that you were brave enough to write that note." Maya's hands trembled as she held his. "I promise to see all of you, the dangerous and the gentle, the criminal and the father, the man who frightens others and the man who makes our daughters laugh. I promise to stand beside you through everything, to trust you with our family, and to never stop being grateful that I was working Register 12 that Tuesday afternoon when your daughter needed help, and you needed saving just as much as I did." The minister pronounced them married, and when Dante kissed his wife, their daughters cheered loudest of all. The reception stretched into evening, friends and associates celebrating with food and music and toasts that ranged from heartfelt to hilarious. Anthony gave a surprisingly emotional speech about watching his boss transform from a man who'd forgotten how to smile into someone who'd remembered how to live. As night fell and the party continued, Dante pulled Maya away from the crowd, leading her to the terrace that had witnessed so many of their important conversations. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her waist as they looked out over the gardens filled with celebrating guests. "Impossibly happy," Maya confirmed, leaning into his strength. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real, that the desperate single mother working a cashier job is now married to Dante Romano, living in a mansion, raising two beautiful daughters." "You were never just a desperate single mother," Dante corrected gently. "You were always extraordinary. I just had the good fortune to recognize it." Music drifted from the garden where their daughters danced together, their laughter carrying on the spring breeze. Maya watched them with a mother's love, seeing the future opening before both girls, bright with possibility rather than limited by circumstance. "What are you thinking?" Dante asked, reading her contemplative expression. "That I'm glad I didn't look away," Maya said simply. "That day at the grocery store, when I saw those men taking Isabella, every instinct told me it wasn't my problem. To let someone else handle it. To protect myself and Sophia by staying invisible. But something made me act anyway. And that one moment of courage changed everything." "For all of us," Dante agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You gave me back my daughter and taught me how to be a father again. You gave Isabella a mother and Sophia a family. You gave me hope when I'd forgotten what it felt like to look forward rather than constantly watching my back. And you gave me security, love, a home that's more than just walls and a roof. You gave Sophia opportunities I never could have provided alone. You showed me that accepting help doesn't make me weak. Sometimes it makes me smart enough to recognize when something better is being offered." They stood together as night deepened and stars emerged, watching their family and friends celebrate this union that had been forged in crisis and tested through everything that followed. The journey from that parking lot to this terrace had been complicated, dangerous, and utterly transformative. But as Maya stood in her husband's arms, wearing a ring that promised forever and watching their daughters dance in gardens she now called home, she knew that every difficult moment had been worth it. Every risk, every choice to stay when leaving would have been safer, every act of faith in a man who'd proven worthy of trust. All of it had led to this perfect evening where past and future met in joyful celebration. "I love you, Mrs. Romano," Dante whispered against her hair. "I love you too," Maya replied, the name feeling right despite her insistence on keeping Rodriguez professionally. Now and always. The music swelled, calling them back to the celebration. Hand in hand, they returned to their guests, to their daughters, to the life they'd built from impossible circumstances and determined hearts. And somewhere in heaven, perhaps Maya's first husband smiled, knowing his daughter was loved and his wife had found happiness again. Because that's what real love does. It doesn't demand permanence as its only form, but instead wants those it touches to thrive, even if that means finding new love when the old one can no longer sustain. The party continued long into the night, filled with laughter and music and the joy of people who'd witnessed something rare, a love story that began with courage and grew through honesty into something that would last lifetimes. And if occasionally, late at night, Maya still thought about that Tuesday afternoon when she'd scrawled a desperate note and handed it to a stranger, she no longer wondered if she'd made the right choice. She knew. Because courage rewarded is hope restored. Because small actions can have enormous consequences. Because sometimes the person you save ends up saving you right back. And because at the end of every difficult journey, if you're brave enough to take the first step and strong enough to keep walking, you might just find yourself exactly where you were always meant to be. Home. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.